Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
So, congratulations. It is your funniest book.
Good. Yeah.
But it's funny in the good sense, but it's also funny that you did it. So I think the first thing I have to ask is for you to account for yourself and this decision to write a book about a movie that very few Americans are sure of what it is when they hear the title.
Yeah, I guess that's something we can come on to, the difference in the status of the film in America and Britain. But for me, it's my second book about a film. The first one was about Andrei Tarkovsky's film Stalker, although I did a podcast with somebody today who said, yeah, your earlier book was about the film Slasher. Anyway, and of course, Stalker, as many of you know, is it's the Everest of art cinema, and it's a test of your endurance and discernment as a sort of cinema goer. Can you survive in that thin air, that makes such demands on the viewer? And
so to be the viewer who actually wrote a whole book about it is like to be the one who ascended Everest without it. Oxygen tank.
Yes, that's right. I'm the Reinhold Messner, or whatever his name is, that's a film that really had meant so much to me. And after writing the book, it can sometimes happen that I had a friend who was writing a biography of Margaret Dürer, which she never finished because she just came to hate Margaret Dürer so much. And certainly, writing a book about anything, you really get to know what you think of it. And for me, having written this book about Stalker, my high opinion of it was raised still further. I think it's not just one of the greatest films ever made, but one of the greatest artworks of any kind. Anyway, so that was it. People would always ask me, did you think about doing any other film? And I said, no, and I meant it. But always in the back of my mind was the fact there was another film which sort of meant as much to me, and it was this film, which I first saw when I was 10 in 1969. Very important difference is that I've seen Stalker loads and loads of times, but always at the cinema. And I'd say to people, you can't watch it on your computer. You've got to see it on the big screen, because the zone where it takes place. What is the zone? Well, the zone it's the wonder of cinematic space. Where Eagles Dare I first saw at the cinema when I was 10, and I've seen it loads of times since then on TV. It's on TV in England the whole time, often only bits of it, often drunk when I've got home from the pub. So it's been it couldn't be, more different. And I liked the kind of joke of that, really, of going from, this very, very serious film to a film that is regarded as a bit of a it's just a sort of stupid action film in many ways, but it does contain, to me, as Stalker does, some essence of cinema, I think.
Well, so it seems one of the things about this book, I have this nice edition that's like a fake old penguin,
yeah,
which I think is a great fetish object, but it seems there's some kind of Englishness that's very basic to this project,
yeah,
which actually isn't so typical of your work overall, but it made me think of your book about the First World War, the missing of Somme.
The Somme.
The Somme, yeah. And so it made me think that inside the sort of japery of this, maybe there was some kind of encoded question about or feeling, maybe like in your body almost, an emotion about being a boy and thinking about English war trauma, because this is kind of a book about Englishmen taking their revenge on Nazis.
Yeah, well, Englishmen and one American,
and
Clint
one
Eastwood.
American,
yeah. You're right. It's really, this thing of where to start. I was born in 1958. which means my childhood was just so drenched in the Second World War. But behind all that, there was the First World War, and I can remember so clearly when I was a kid. When I went round to my friend Gary Hunt's house, his grandfather was there, and his grandfather would always drop his trousers, always. Not for any reason other than to show us his shrapnel wounds from the First World War. He was about 70 then. And the First World War, if you grew up in Britain, it's all around, both in terms of that living connection with it, and also the memorials are everywhere, but it exists entirely in the realm of memory, really. Okay, the Second World War, which completely dominated my childhood, but that was in the realm of culture, really, of comics, toys, those little soldiers, the model planes. They were Airfix models, we called them. Maybe they had a different brand name here, or maybe Airfix was, like everything else, an American company. I don't know.
I think I recognize the name, but
Yeah.
I can't say.
And then films. And so, I did this event with David Thompson the other night, who really hates this film, Where Eagles Dare, because he's significantly older than me. He was born in 1945. So the real war, the grim reality of the war, he was sort of born into its aftermath. But for me, really, my version of the Second World War, as represented in these films and stuff, of which Where Eagles Dare is the climax. I mean, as the 60s went on, the films took on more and more of a kind of, they were more and more about these missions, these kind of, a handful of picked troops. And the thing is that really, I mean, the Second World War for me, in terms of my historical understanding, it meant us and the Americans versus the Germans and the Japanese. It had Stalingrad didn't exist. It had nothing to do with the Holocaust. We only learned about these things much later in the 70s. So the Second World War really was, for me as a kid, never more so than when watching those prisoner of war films, where those German prisoner of war camps looked so much fun. I mean, they looked so much fun, you wondered why they wanted to escape from them. It was, the Second World War was a load of fun. And in a way, this film was no film made the Second World War look like more fun than this. And I should say that, I'm not alone in having this great attachment to this film. The film is just so imprinted in the consciousness of every boy of my age, I would say, to the extent that when we were having the publicity meeting in Britain for this, they know I live in California, so they know I'm used now to that nice positive sort of thing. And they're all very positive about it. But then this young woman said rather cruelly, she said, "Yeah, but is anyone going to buy this book apart from men over 50?" And it was a terrible pall fell upon this otherwise quite jolly meeting as I realised, well, no. But, that rightly despised demographic, there's a lot of us, and I mean, just as a way of illustrating how imprinted in the consciousness it is, during the phone hacking cover-up, the News International, they conveyed the news that they'd successfully destroyed some of the evidence by saying, texting each other broadsword calling Danny Boy, So yeah, it's just really part of being English, this film.
So I've done the same thing. I wrote one short book about a film, and so I'm interested in some of the formal problems of the compositional method. Can you talk about? I had They Live on my computer, and I would watch snippets of it over and over and over again, and just run it constantly. I also subjected everyone I knew to screenings because I wanted to feel other people's reactions. So I would sit people down. I think, Ariel, I made you watch it with me once, right? And and sort of narrate, as rehearsing, because there's a way in which this is I think one of the reviewers said that your book was like a written director's commentary, though not by the director.
Yes.
And that, it is almost frame by frame, or it feels that way.
Yours isn't quite as frame by framey, though.
Well,
is it?
I did take that same approach, although I inserted other kinds of voice into it. Yours is very pure, which I'm interested in too, because you've kind of excluded yourself from the book in a way.
Yeah, apart from a few little. Well, yeah, there's.
But it's mostly in the footnotes and the note
That's
at the
right.
end that you allow your own presence into the book, which is not your usual procedure. Usually, you get between the reader and D.H. Lawrence or the jazz or whatever.
Yeah, that's true, I think. And also, well, if we go back again to the Stalker book, which is where I, developed this way of doing it. So what I do is I just summarize the film. Perhaps not frame by frame, but certainly shot by shot. And it seemed to me that in the case of the Stalker book, you do that, then it becomes appropriate to go into these sort of personal digressions, because as you know with Stalker, it starts off with this very literal journey, 3 guys going into the zone, at the heart of which is the room where your deepest wish will come true, and then their physical movement through the zone becomes increasingly impeded by metaphysical digressions. And also they find that although they're only 100 yards from the house, they have to take a very elaborate route. So in order to remain faithful to the film, to stick close to it, it was sort of necessary for me to digress and talk about what my own deepest wishes were. Actually, I should say it's not deepest wishes plural, it's deepest wish singular, the thing that defines you as what you are. Anyway, this, of course, Where Eagles Dare, it doesn't really lend itself to, shall we say, metaphysical speculation or that kind of digression. What it does lend itself to, with all its plots and turns, is just sort of me just sort of hanging on by my, hanging on to the cable car, I think, like that. So, yeah, sticking very, very close to it. And also, I mean, I think this links in with your initial question, why Where Eagles Dare after Stalker? I think stylistically, that's one of the things that I tend to do. I'll make a serious point, then undercut it with a kind of joke, and then serious point again, and then, So I like the way serious Stalker, not serious Where Eagles Dare. But yeah, so the tone of it, even though I really think there's a bit where I say, it's not just that I would rather watch Where Eagles Dare than Wim Wenders' Till the End of the World. I really believe Where Eagles Dare is a better film than Till the End of the World. What's your opinion of that film, by the way?
I like the soundtrack to the
right.
Wim
Yes.
Wenders.
Yeah.
That's a good soundtrack.
So
So this is. I'm still interested in getting you to account a little bit for the procedure of writing, like with the film, the physical presence of the film. How did you carry this action through? I mean, as a literal procedure.
Yeah, I think a little bit like you, but not at first, in that in both books I relied on my memory of it. And that seemed really fine with Stalker, because as you know, the zone is reconfiguring itself all the time according to what people think of it. It's not a fixed objective thing. And then, of course, I didn't want the book to become ludicrously wide of the mark, so then I watched bits of the film again to make sure I wasn't making a claim about the film that just wasn't accurate. With this one, I stuck much more closely to it and began watching bits of it much earlier in the process. But the key thing about it really is, I mean, it was the unlike you, because you're such a big part of your sort of writerly identity is invested in the novel. I mean, you can do that thing which you can even think up plots, can't you? It's you can. I mean,
Every 3 years I can think of one, and that's all it takes.
And I've never been able to think of plots. So the thing is, here's this film with this fantastically complex, not entirely plausible plot. So all of that work is being done for me by the thing that I'm commenting on, and that I think just really freed me stylistically. So really, the film becomes just a sort of an excuse for some sort of stylistic sort of showing off.
So it's like a novelization of Where Eagles Dare, done by someone who's too amused to stick to the job.
Well, that's right. Although the novelisation of Where Eagles Dare had already been done by Alistair MacLean, in that it wasn't, unlike Guns of Navarone, a film adapted from his novel.
Oh, it didn't start with a novel.
No, it started with a screenplay. Elliot Kastner said, would you like to write a screenplay? And he wrote this screenplay, and then wrote a novelisation of it. So mine is in this kind of thing. So he did the novelisation, and I'm doing the whatever it is. Anyway, but yeah.
So this reminds me, I wanted to ask you about Alistair MacLean, because there's a secret writerly source hiding behind your energies in writing this, because you read him devotedly at one point, but he doesn't. The film holds up for you, and he doesn't.
That's right. But I mean, Alistair MacLean is a foundational influence for you too, isn't he?
I don't know if I would say that. I read 3 or 4 of them, but I think it's very English. No, I certainly didn't read them all the way
you
did.
Out of character with you, Jonathon. The ultimate completist, I think of you as.
Yeah, I failed on this. On this
and what sort of age were you when you were doing this rather cursory working through of the MacLean?
13 or 14.
Yeah, that's the age. Yeah.
I started with Ice Station Zebra, which I mean, I liked Arctic stories, and I think I wanted him to be more of a science fiction writer than he was.
That is his most science fiction-y book. Yeah, great title too, isn't it? Yeah. So yes, we were reading him. I guess everybody reads him at the same age, and he was huge.
Not everybody, Geoff. You do not have a group of people nodding along with you in this audience right now.
Well, maybe that was. But I mean, what the surprising thing is that he was a big, whopping, great-selling author, and his reading kind of base can't have existed entirely of 13 or 14-year-olds. But it's hard to believe anyone over the age of 15 could derive any pleasure from it, because when I started to reread Where Eagles Dare, because I had this lovely idea that at the end of the book I was going to have a chapter called Alistair MacLean, a critical reappraisal, and I thought this would be fun. And then of course you start reading it and it's just unreadably it's so terrible. But I mean, he was really able to come up with some plots, and although it's sort of
not like me. I got the hint there. Yeah.
I mean, and so that. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's you can plot holes in it, but you can sort of spot holes in the plots. But it's a really quite ingenious series of turnarounds that takes place in the film.
So one thing that you don't do is put the film in the context of the director's body of work, and his name barely comes into it, Brian G. Hutton. And I wondered if, I mean, I think in a loose way you probably are a tourist, but here this is an artifact that's kind of lacking in an auteur. It's almost as if you offered yourself as its, MacLean is insufficient. Hutton goes unmentioned. It's as if you're the new director of what's interesting about Where Eagles Dare. But I mean, did you think about?
Oh yeah,
it's so different from the Tarkovsky situation.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the joys of doing the Tarkovsky book was to, by watching it, to find out how some of the magical effects are achieved. How does the zone become this sentient thing? And there are certain shot sequences where you can work out how it's done. I mean, I don't want to go into it now, but the incredible thing really is that even when you see how the trick has been done, and this is not the case with, say, magicians, the magic is still intact. Now, of course, Brian G. Hutton is not a name to be spoken of in the same breath as Werner Herzog or, Antonioni or something like that, although he is enjoying a bit of a revival at the moment on the basis of... Anyone know? Oh, Eve Babbitts, because Eve Babbitts had a long-standing affair with him. So he's, he comes up quite a lot in that Lily Analik book about Eve Babbitts. He doesn't come out of it quite as well as Harrison Ford, who emerges from it as a truly awesome figure. This do you remember? Yeah, God, the Harrison 9 times a night Ford. That's a thing to give us all pause, isn't it? Yeah, but he really. I mean, on the other hand, one of the things that I most like in film. I mean, let's go back to this. Isn't it striking the way that, we read we get sent books, and quite often we give up on them after a couple of pages. With films, though, a film can reveal its crapness in about, I would say, 30 seconds. Don't you think, Joanathan? And what is so? Do you think, or do you think even less? 10 seconds. Good, yeah. I mean, it's just, and one of the things.
Yeah, you know what kind of world you're in.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that strikes me is that quite often you'll see a film and you realise really early on, oh God, the person has got no rhythm. I mean, and that's the key thing. And although there aren't any really elaborate shots like the amazing, through the window, round the corner, round the house, back in again that you get at the end of The Passenger, say. There's none of those those cinematographic pyrotechnics. But, I mean, it's a really smooth bit of filmmaking, and a testament to its rhythmic power, I think, is that once I start watching it, I'll think, okay, I'm going to watch it until they parachute out of the planes, partly because I just always love anything with parachute jumping in it. But I can never find the moment to stop. It has this, great rhythmic propulsion, I think. And that is something that you don't get in just a workaday sort of, workaday hack director. So I think it is an impressive but invisible bit of directing. And perhaps the most impressive thing about it is precisely the way that he doesn't feel the need to impart any kind of, authorial stamp on it, but lets, the actors and the story do the work.
So, one of your, so you're kind of famously a generalist. You do different things, and you make a kind of sport of digression, in the microcosm within your microcosm of a book, but also the macrocosm of your career.
But we're very similar.
Doing,
I
guess so.
Yeah,
unexpected decisions. But there's, if there is a through line, you write about photography with enormous devotion. I mean, there's several books of writing about photography, and you've written essays for monographs. I mean, there's the Gary Winogrand book. I don't know if they've got it here.
Oh, they have. Yeah, it's up there. It's actually a snip at $65, isn't it?
There you go.
Yeah.
Selling,
beautiful.
Jeff. Do that work. So, do you look at? I mean, I think that I'm confident that the Tarkovsky book is a book that, in a way, is a book about photography. That you're interested in film's aspect of being a kind of a photographic. Photograph in time. But I don't know whether you look at Where Eagles Dare.
Well, Where Eagles Dare, I think Where Eagles Dare, it's the experience of Where Eagles Dare, I think. And what I'm trying to do is be faithful to that experience, which is why I think this thing of tone is so important, because academics are capable of anything. You could presumably write some, some discursive thing, making all sorts of claims for it, but it really wouldn't be inappropriate. It really wouldn't be appropriate. It seemed to me as, the only way to write about this film was to do so very, 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 very lightly. It's a thoroughly immersive. It's one of the sort of films that really define for me what cinema is. I really insist on that, and I think maybe it's an age thing as well, because of obviously there's loads of action, but it's a pre-CGI film, and I wonder what you think. I think people of our generation, we are just so resistant to CGI.
In-camera effects are much more exciting, but then there's also in a way, the equivalent deflation of when you see bad rear projection work. And there are sequences in rear projection that I don't know if they break the spell, but they put you in that. I mean, it's the same way certain Hitchcock films force you into that.
I struggle with back projection in Hitchcock. There's a few clumsy bits of back projection in Where Eagles Dare, but the key thing is that it was jokingly referred to as where stunt doubles dare, because I think actually it's the main stuntman, Alf Joint is his name. The stuntmen actually spent more time in front of the camera than Richard Burton, who was so chronically drunk during filming that when he went to the premiere, he said, "God, I've got no memory of it, but actually it was pretty good." And I think one of the things is, whereas the first thing CGI always does away with is gravity. Whereas gravity is a major force in Where Eagles Dare, isn't it? And I think one of the reasons the action sequences are convincing is because, people really are doing, quite dangerous things.
So in a moment, I think I'll invite people to ask you questions or I don't know, ask us questions if you've got one for me. But while you think of that, I want to make you account a little bit for your, for the presence of Clint Eastwood in the film, and the way you write about his acting rhythms, I think is extraordinarily sensitive. Does your interest in him within this film extend beyond to other Eastwood films?
God, I mean, I'm so worried here. I don't want to get deported, but no, I mean, I'm not. I'm not at all a fan of Eastwood as a director. I think he's a really plodding director, with maybe the exception of American Sniper. But most of the time, I find him a real plodder. As an actor, he's incredibly limited. I have a fondness for Dirty Harry, but as David Thompson, so let's make sure we come back to David Thompson later on. As David Thompson says, the great thing about Dirty Harry is his tweed jacket. I love the way he says that rather than his, the big magnum or whatever. But I mean, I think it's about the balance between Eastwood and Burton. That is to say, Burton, famously what was he? He was essentially a voice, a Shakespearean actor who sort of despised these rather stupid films that he did for vast amounts of money. But that voice of his is so amazing, and I find it absolutely mesmerizing. And it's like when he's delivering some of these speeches in Where Eagles Dare, it's like Shakespeare because of just the power of his voice. So there's a nice pairing off between him and the very nearly silent Clint Eastwood. And when in a documentary about Eastwood, I remember Burton saying, yes, he has this kind of dynamic lethargy. And that's such a great summing up of, I think, of how Eastwood is. And again, David Thompson says, there's all this fuss made about actors who can understand a character. But he says it's just as important how a character moves. And I feel that panther-like way that Eastwood glides through this film, inhabiting a sort of existing in a completely different relation to time to the others, it's really, really quite something. What about you and Eastwood?
I'm pretty resistant to him too. I mean, and I agree with you about his directing, but there's very few exceptions where I think he sort of does anything as an actor that arrests my attention. But the way you describe him in here made me think about him in a way I hadn't before. And of course, it's almost like his presence as an American in this British, the system of the British actors and their enmities and their masquerade, and he's some sort of other element that stands apart from them. And it's like an allegory of the American presence in the war,
Yes, and he's surrounded by these kind of, high British thesps, So they're all coming out of Shakespeare. I can't remember Patrick Wymark and the others. They're all in that. I mean, they're all the British actors are sounding like they're uttering lines written by Shakespeare, and then there's this kind of actor really entire. So they're coming out of the theatre. Eastwood is there as a genuine American movie star, and there's all sorts of, I think I'd say in the book at one time that Eastwood really, when we think about his acting career, what's he done? He's just squinted really. But there's a great bit in Where Eagles Dare. They're behind enemy lines in Germany, And of course, so we have to assume that they're all speaking German. They're all fluent in German, we're told. But of course, they're speaking English. It's just a kind of convention. And then at one point, when they're in the bar, Burton has to go out and he says to Eastwood, keep an eye on things. And so Eastwood is left sort of squinting at the bar. But as I sort of joke in the book, he's not just squinting, he's squinting in German, which I think says something about his great sort of range as an actor.
So while I, again, just seed the ground for maybe some audience questions, what did you want to tell us about David Thompson and his response to this in your conversation?
That's right. Well, I mean, we could do some sort of arm wrestle about who loves David Thompson more, but it would be a tough one, wouldn't it?
It would be a tie.
Yeah,
no, I'd come out 6 languages ahead, Geoff.
I mean, so, David Thompson's biographical dictionary of cinema, one of the epic works of literature of our time, and I think it's been really important for me that in the dictionary he just barely mentions Stalker. So there was that, there was a bit of room left there. There's no entry on Brian G. Hutton in the dictionary. He likes, and he gives very scant attention to Burton. So it was really important for me, I think, that there was that space left, I guess.
Yeah.
And then also, because it's not such a serious film, it hadn't been much written
this
about.
This suggests something really interesting. It's writing this kind of book maybe about occupying a space that's been left empty. That you couldn't have. I mean, there may be. I'm not going to propose that there are other films that you love as much as these two. You've now said that they're the two on a summit, Stalker and Where Eagles Dare. But I mean, there's a remark at the end that you would, if you did it again, you'd write about Point Blank.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of appreciations of Point Blank, and so maybe the fact that you didn't actually opt to do that is because the space was.
That's a very good point.
The area was occupied.
Yeah.
I mean, you've always told me that you'd like me to write about Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And I feel there's no space there. That it's been filled in.
Yeah, but nobody called Joanathan Lethem has written a book about Bob Dylan. That's the thing. I mean, I still feel you've got tons to say about Bob Dylan. Just to go back to Point Blank, though, that is interesting because that film occupies a huge place in Thompson's consciousness. In that, the great moment in the dictionary. The moment when you first realise you're reading something extraordinary is the entry. Under D, it says something like, the author is torn between his obligation to cover everyone from Antonioni to Zanuck.
Or from Thorold Dickinson to Zanuck.
Very good.
A Swedish director with the same name, same last name as Angie Dickinson.
That's right, yeah, and he says, and the simple fact that Angie is his favourite actress. Yeah. So Angie Dickinson, of course, is the main, the female lead in Point Blank. And then also Lee Marvin is a colossally important figure for Thompson, as is the director John Borman. So I mean, I wonder, am I feeling I'm finally ready to get into territory that's previously occupied by the great David Thompson.
Great. Well, so have you guys got questions for Geoff?
Or for Joanathan?
Yeah. Hey.
So Geoff, I have a question in regard to, I know you've mentioned in an interview before about how it was pretty significant having the Labour Party in power when you first started out.
Oh yeah.
And I wonder if you could just kind of extrapolate on how the difference in terms of the landscape that it is now versus back then, and having that ability to kind of be able to pursue a little more passion with some anxiety for life taken away.
Wow, this is what we call a non-filmic question, and it's about. And you want me to talk about the? Just rephrase it.
Basically, how crucial do you think it was having the Labour Party be in power to kind of give you a sort of like environment where you could kind of take some more risks?
Oh, I got you. Yeah, I understand. Well, actually, the truth is the period that you're referring to. When I was just after I'd left university, crucially, the Labour Party was not in power. it was the era of Thatcher, and that was a period of huge unemployment, but with all the safety nets put in place by previous Labour governments, which meant that for a whole load of Oxford graduates like me, it was this wonderful thing where we could leave university, sign on the dole, no chance of getting a job, and live, frankly, as though we were on an MFA program, a fully funded MFA program. So it was a very easy way to live at a time when it was incredibly cheap to live in London generally. So and times are very, very different now, of course. I thought for a moment you were going to ask me, what I thought of, the current state of the Labour Party and that kind of thing. Oh, who was that question from? Oh, yeah. Well, it's, goodness knows. I mean, it's funny, even given, I'm struck by the way that even for someone who's, who owes everything to the Labour Party, as I and my family do, I sort of think, God, if I hate Corbyn as much as I do, what must the, less sympathetic part of the country think? And actually, as somebody said recently, they love him because, of course, he's like almost a guarantee of a Tory victory. So that's my little take on it. It's just so awful. This person who's not, he made up his mind about everything and became this sort of Trotskyist with the belief that a world revolution might be just around the corner, especially, and he still thinks it is at some level, And then, of course, Britain and America are just imperialist powers to him. It's just an amazingly kind of 17-year-old Trotsky, 1970 Trotskyist view of the. What do you think? Oh, well, I think he's Sanders is an altogether more sympathetic character. Anyway, a lady behind you had a question.
Yeah. Oh, I'm really going to try not to. Oh, thank you. Thanks. It's nice. I backed into doing it here and there, but I think it really does seem to me that the space has been filled in by people who've given even more of their lives to Bob Dylan than I have. I mean, in many cases, Michael Gray. There are these phenomenal exegetical tomes, and so instead I've kind of nibbled around the margin. I wrote a liner note for an album of covers of Bob Dylan songs in the '80s, and that's my little shred. It's like the Where Eagles Dare of Bob Dylan. It's where no one else wants to go. So I staked out that territory. But no, I'm really not going to do it anymore. I think I'm writing about music less. I think that's something I did. For me, it was great to do it, but I don't think I'll do it again so much. Thanks. More questions? Yeah. Sure, Geoff. Yeah. Why don't you talk about teaching?
Yeah. Well, you see, it's very different for me. I mean, in America, you publish a slim album of verse when you're 23 or whatever, and on the basis of that, you can get a teaching job. Generally, and then you start teaching early on, and then by the time and that's it, and then the support mechanism for writers in America is so huge that you can basically do nothing for the next 20 years, whereas in England it wasn't like that, So I came to teaching very late, and really in America on these MFA programs. And I absolutely loved it for a simple reason, I think. Let's say the typical MFA student is, roughly between about 23 and 30, something like that. That's been my experience anyway. And, that is such a great time in your life because you've done your sort of undergraduate work. Your brain has been formatted. And then you've just got this I can remember myself at that age when I was doing my equivalent of an MFA program, living on the dole in England, and just that incredible receptivity to films, music, all of this kind of stuff. It's such a wonderful period in anyone's life. And also, that's at the age when you're really possessed by this desire to be a writer. It's just a great thing. And these kids that I was teaching in Iowa and Austin, they were so full of ambition in a really good way, wanting to be great writers, And, okay, so I teach them, but of course the truth is my relationship is entirely vampiric, because on the one hand, I just feel so rejuvenated by being around people at that stage in their life. And also, crucially, they turn you on to things. So because it's just so essential as you get older to have access to young people telling you what to listen to. Because the worst thing that can happen to you, really, if you want to continue having any kind of creative life, is to succumb to a sort of Philip Larkinism, whereby you just lose interest in everything.
Where all you do is write books about movies you watched when you were 12 years old. Yeah.
No. Anyway, what about you?
I'm just gonna extend. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna extend your thought, which is ended up very much where I center in my experience of teaching, which is that I'm increasingly dependent on them to not just point me to the more interesting music and television or books often, but that they challenge how I think, and that they're sort of my best hope for for having something worth doing, in the next part of my writing life is if I listen as much as I teach. And I do a different thing. I had some experience in MFA programs, but I teach undergraduates, which not to set it up as there's one that's that's preferential, but I do find that there's something super elastic and there's the 18 or 19-year-olds in a college are self-inventing at a very pure level. They're playing, and even when they might end up later being an MFA student, when they're taking my class, at some level it's sort of in air quotes. They're playing at everything, and that's great. I think that's a great way to approach writing, actually, in the kind of polymorphous, perverse stance of maybe I'm a poet, maybe I'm an essayist, maybe I'm not a writer at all. But and so I try to teach them on that footing where we're in a laboratory or a playground, and that itself is replenishing for me too.
And I guess it's one of the many things we have in common that neither of us came through any kind of creative writing mentorship program like that.
Right. It's true. I hadn't thought of that. I mean, most American writers my age, really loosely, I'm sure there are plenty of exceptions, but almost everyone I know who's my age or younger than me does have an MFA. I mean, they and I didn't even graduate college.
But generally, when he admits that, then he very quickly points out he's been in receipt of 3 honorary degrees.
In 30 languages, Jeff. I was too anti-institutional. I took every aspect of college as a personal affront to my sense of freedom.
Yeah.
And I cheated myself of all kinds of interesting participations, actually, which I then had to circle around and kind of invent versions of for myself in my 20s informally. So, I did seek, for instance, the mentorship of older writers. I tugged on people's sleeves and sort of said, read my drafts and talk to me about what you're doing. So, in a way, I had to make up a patchwork version of those things for myself. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to make another. I don't have a counterfactual version of my own coming of age to compare it to, but I got through anyway. But, I think I was just dumb about it. I didn't know that there were MFA programs, really. I was working on an older model where a writer runs away from things and works in a bookshop. I really believed, this is the script, so I'm going to go and participate in that script, but it was an elapsed script.
It was in the process of lapsing,
Yeah.
I think, maybe, yeah. But, I mean, of course, Joanathan didn't need to go to college because, he's one of the
Stop.
Well, no, but you are. The fact is,
Stop, Geoff.
you are the most. Not to say you're widely read is to understate it. It's just, I mean, your expertise in British women writers of the 1930s is legendary, and that's not a joke. It's true.
But I'm very weak on Alistair MacLean. A couple more, and then, hey.
I was wondering about the upcoming film adaptation. Do you have any connection to that?
Barely.
Are you optimistic about it?
I don't know. I'm going to be a paying customer, or maybe they'll give me a ticket. I hope they do that. But I'm really going to just be a film goer. When Motherless Brooklyn opens, I found out just now it's going to be the start of November. It's been a non-film for so long, for 20 years, that it's taking me a lot of work, a lot of effort to accustom myself to the fact that it's going to actually be a film. And so I'm still trying to believe, and that's partly also because I wasn't involved. I've never read the script, and I wasn't drawn into the project. I spent one day on the set, which was very charming for me because they were nearly done with it, and they all seemed really kind of thrilled to meet me and to show me what they were doing. But you don't learn very much from one day of looking at them make one shot over and over again. So I don't know. I'll see what I think. But it'll be an interesting experience. I do think that it's lucky, actually, for me that it took so long. When the book came out in 1999, it was optioned immediately for Edward Norton, and it was easy to wish that they would make that film right away. And there was a little window where it seemed like they might make it right away, but I think that would have been very imprisoning for me. I'm already too much the guy who wrote Motherless Brooklyn, and if that film had come out and garnered any attention whatsoever at that time, I'd have been stuck with that too completely. So I like the fate that I've come to here. But I'll tell you in a year what I think. Thanks.
We could
maybe
call it a day, yeah.
Maybe that's it.
Okay.
And I know Geoff will sign books, and I'll do it too.
Joanathan too, yeah. Okay, thank you, everybody. Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.